Hey everybody, welcome to another Wednesday night art show. Tonight I have Theresa. Oh, I almost called you Treasures. Yay!
That's all right.
And we're going to be talking about Etsy again tonight since it's been over a year since she was here with Planet Alyssa and talked about Etsy. Oh, I don't know what. I figured this time I didn't move my own hand. Jeez. So, refresh everybody's memory of who you are, Theresa, and where they can find you or where they can't find you for the summer at least.
Okay. Well, hey everybody. My name's Theresa. I go by Thrifty Theresa pretty much everywhere on the internet. I have an Etsy store called Thrifty Theresa. I also got a couple other Etsy stores that I might mention during the course of our conversation here. But my main store is Thrifty Theresa, where I sell vintage items on Etsy. I do have a YouTube channel, and Chris was mentioning you won't be able to find me on YouTube this summer because I have a full-time job and my work schedule during the summer is crazy. So I had to prioritize what I have to do and what I want to do when I have some spare time at home, and I want to keep my Etsy business open, and I can't really find enough time to be making the haul videos and the sales report videos and the other little videos that I make. But I have been making these YouTube videos for well over a year now. I hope you will check out my channel so that you can see the different things that we talk about. And yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Not how. Well, I'll start with this question because it won't be about going to Etsy right now. But how have you been since the last time you were here? So I would say it's definitely over a year. I don't know how many months over. I think it's like 14 months since you've been on.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's been great. When I first had my interview with you on the R show, I was a fairly new vintage seller. I believe I had only been doing it maybe 3 or 4 months at that point. I have been on Etsy since 2007, where I used to make handmade items. So I was really comfortable with the Etsy platform, but I was new to being a vintage seller. So now my vintage store has been open for over a year. I am slowly but surely trying to make it successful. I have a small goal for myself for 2016 to get one sale per day. It doesn't mean any certain dollar amount. I have low-end items and medium-range items and not too many high-range items right now, but I would like to get one sale per day for the year on average. Last month, what was that last month? May? No, it wasn't May because May I took some vacation time. April was my first full calendar month where I made that sales goal of one sale per day. So I'm trying to keep that rolling for 2016. And yeah, so far so good.
Well, that's good. Uh, I don't know if you want to tell everybody what your other job is or not.
My other job is I work in a call center for a company, and I basically dispatch maintenance technicians, and it's all across the country. So people call me for help, and then I have to call a maintenance person to go do the work that needs to be done. It's kind of a emergency type situation. So it's really critical. We are a 24-hour call center. So part of the reason I'm so busy in the summer with my full-time job is because I have to cover shifts for other people who take vacation. So some days I might be working swing shift and some days I might be working graveyard shift rather than a regular 9 to 5. And that's primarily because people take vacations during the summer, but also summer is our highest call volumes for the year. So summer's a little crazy. But I am really blessed to have a job, a full-time job that I don't hate. It's not always the best, but it is good. It pays the bills. But having the reselling job and selling online helps me afford all the other stuff. One of the things that just happened, and if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see, I recently took an Alaska cruise with my father, which was paid for pretty much entirely by money that I made from reselling over the past year. So that was great. That was great, and that's why I do what I do.
If Etsy or your reselling was to improve and make the money that you make doing the calling, would you switch and just quit your job and stay with reselling?
If that were to happen, if I were to become super successful with reselling, it's possible I would consider quitting my job. I've been there for about 13 years now, so that would be walking away from something, it would be a long thing to think about. With, I've got health insurance now, and I've got paid vacation time now, and that's the kind of stuff that you really have to think about when you want to be a full-time reseller. So I'm not quite there yet. I'm not quite sure that is going to ever be my goal, to be a full-time reseller, but it's possible. Maybe. And if I were to ever lose my job, reselling is absolutely the thing that's going to keep me afloat, keep me living in my apartment, keep me affording food for my cat. And yeah, so that's good to have the reselling to fall back on. Right now, I do consider it more of a hobby, but it is a hobby that is making my life better, and making my father's life better, because I'm able to share things with him because of the extra money that I make online.
Well, since you've been on, I've actually had a couple other people that came on and talked about Etsy. So some people might think it's been talked about a lot on my show, but I don't consider it that often. It talked about that often. But I do see we have 13 viewers, so hopefully everybody's going to get some good information tonight.
Okay.
What I want to know is, when some of the other people that were on, they talked about having teams. Is that really that important to make sales?
I am going to say no. It is not important to be in teams that I've really found. Now, with that being said, I am on a couple teams, and I do use them in one specific way. In On Etsy, when you create your listing, you not only have the title of the listing and the pictures and the description of the listing. At the very bottom of the page, which most buyers and users don't even pay attention to, is Etsy has you put in tags. And tags are just keywords that are going to be beneficial for Google searches and everything and of course the Etsy search results to find you. So they give you 13 tags to fill in. I always use, almost always, 99% always use one tag for one of my teams. And the reason I do that is because then other team members can find my items. It's not necessarily helping me from a random buyer perspective, because the random buyer is searching for whatever it is that they're searching for. But if another team member searches for the word orange and then the name of the team, because I have the name of the team in my tags, in my keywords down there, they can then find items in my shop that are orange. And they can create what Etsy calls treasuries. And treasuries are little collage pictures of items, and people make little themes. So maybe they're doing one for oranges or Florida, or anything that has to do with orange. Gator, what's that? Isn't it Gators one of those sports teams that have orange in their colors? Anyway, so whatever the theme is, they would create a treasury around that theme, and they may feature one of my items because my item is going to appear in their search because I'm part of their team. That is really the only way that I utilize Etsy teams. Now, Etsy teams can I think help you really well possibly in the beginning of your Etsy journey. And again, it's all about getting exposure, getting yourself out there. But really, when you're communicating with people on Teams, you're talking to another seller. So you can't necessarily think that that other seller is going to be wanting to buy your products. But if that other seller is active on the team, they again may want to feature your items if you have cool items that they find interesting. So getting to know your teams can be helpful, especially in the beginning when you're trying to build a brand, when you're trying to build your reputation. That can be great, but I've really stopped using them except for the those tags, those keywords. I always reserve at least one for the two teams that I'm on. I'll use one or the other depending on which one I think is going to get me more views.
Okay. Well, we have a question. More like Chad Goldenfinger wants you to, in 2 minutes, talk him into doing Etsy. Sell it to him.
All right, start your clock. The reason I enjoy selling on Etsy is they have very low fees. It is 20 cents to list your item, and your item is listed for an entire 4 months. So that's only 20 cents that you're paying to have that item on Etsy for 4 months. At the end of 4 months, your listing expires, but it makes it really easy for you to relist that item. And again, it's only another 20 cents for 4 months. If your item sells, your final value fees are, I believe it's 3.5% for the Etsy transaction, and then there is another percentage for the payment, which is also low because it's approximately the same percentage as PayPal. And you can use PayPal. They also have direct checkout, so your buyers can use credit cards and such. Having the low selling fees is, of course, great for business. You're not giving Etsy a ton of money to have people view your products and buy your products. And also the 4-month exposure is considerably longer than other places. That is one of the main reasons I enjoy selling on Etsy. If I still have time, if my 2 minutes haven't elapsed yet, the other great reason that I enjoy selling on Etsy are the customers. I find the Etsy customers to be wonderful, nice, beautiful people. They are really friendly. I have only had 2 returns in my entire history on Etsy, and that goes back to 2007. Anytime I've had a return, it's always been well managed, and the customer's always been polite, and it just goes flawlessly. I find that Etsy customers are willing to pay more for vintage products because they are looking for vintage products. They expect high quality, and they will be happy to pay more for that high quality. Those are the main reasons I love selling on Etsy.
Okay, just another question, but before I read it, he wants to know, is the platform user-friendly?
I would say so. I believe that it is pretty user-friendly. It's easy to learn. I taught my 72, he was 72 at the time, he's 73 now. I taught my father how to use the Etsy platform, and he's able to make listings. It's a no-brainer. The majority of the listing process are little drop-down menus, which are easy peasy. Filling out your own description is something that you should already know how to do if you're selling on other platforms. I think it is a lot cleaner than eBay and Amazon to create a listing. The one thing I would improve about Etsy is they only allow 5 photos for your listing, which doesn't always help with vintage items because you want to point out flaws and things like that. So that would not be the user friendly, but creating a listing, understanding the platform, I do believe is relatively easy. If my dad can do it, I got faith in the rest of you guys.
Okay, we have it. Garage Flips. He wants to know, what is your sell-through rate on Etsy? I have about a 50% sell-through rate on eBay every month. Does Etsy come close to that?
I do not have information on my sell-through rate. I don't have that kind of calculations. I don't have a mathematical brain, and I've never thought about that. Like I was saying when we first started, I have a small goal for myself to have one sale per day. My vintage shop has only been open a little over a year, maybe a year and a half at this point, and it can take a while to get selling and get sales rolling when you are a new Etsy seller. I think some people may get frustrated with Etsy because they're used to selling on eBay and other platforms where there is more viewers, there's more shoppers. Etsy is still, I would still say Etsy is relatively unknown because it's also primarily thought as a crafting platform. The majority of Etsy users are people who make things by hand and then sell things. They knit things or they bead things or stuff like that. So being a vintage seller on Etsy, I would say it takes some time to start your shop. So a sell-through rate is something that is going to come with time and patience and a lot of effort on your part. It is definitely in your best interest to be listing every single day. And that can be as simple as listing one item per day, 2 items per day, to keep yourself in the top of the search results. It's not the kind of thing where you can just throw 10 items in your shop, sit back, and expect orders to come in. Etsy takes work.
We the Garage Flips also, so the sales are more store driven than product driven.
Absolutely. They are store driven. It is entirely up to you to make your items visually appealing. Make sure you are using as many keywords and stuff as possible. Have a nice detailed description. Um, it really behooves you to put a lot of effort into it, and to list constantly, like I said, to keep yourself relevant, keep yourself in the search results. But I will say, when you are, as a Etsy buyer, as a person who shops on Etsy, people know what they're looking for. If I want a vintage Care Bear, I'm going to look for a vintage Care Bear. And if you have all your titles and tags and descriptions filled out properly, I'm going to be able to tell that you've got the vintage Care Bear that I want. So again, it really is up to you to make your listings as best as possible to attract the shoppers.
Now, you said that payments you can take direct payment, which means into your bank account and PayPal, right?
What they call a direct checkout system, which allows their customers to sell by credit or pay by credit card. And again, the percentage of the fees taken out for their direct checkout is equal to the amount that you would get from PayPal. The PayPal fees are the same pretty much. I have on my shop, so the customer has a choice. They can either use the Etsy system to use their credit cards or whatnot, or they can use PayPal. And of course, we all know on PayPal you can use credit cards and stuff too. It just gives the buyer an option as to what they feel more comfortable with. If you use the Etsy direct checkout, the money goes into your bank account once a week. So every Monday, any money that you've generated from sales through the Etsy direct checkout gets deposited into your bank on Monday. They do have an option that if you get a load of money in there and you want to be paid sooner, there is a way for you to do that. It's pretty simple. I believe it only takes about 24 hours for that to get deposited into your checking account or credit card, whatever you use.
And what about going right into PayPal?
It just goes directly to your PayPal. That's it.
Well, I didn't know if maybe I didn't know if they're going to make you wait to get the money in PayPal like they were doing for your bank account.
No, the PayPal transaction is just a PayPal transaction, just like it would be if you bought something on eBay. The money's automatically in your PayPal account, however long it takes PayPal to process that, and then everybody knows how to get their money from PayPal. So it's the same situation. So Etsy, again, will deposit your money into a holding account. They will then give it to you once a week or on demand if you request it from them. Or use PayPal. The money goes directly to PayPal.
Okay. Cherry Vintage said flips is about 5 to 10% monthly straight for vintage sellers with about 700 good vintage items in their store. I got that from watching Planet Alyssa. She shares her sales.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cherry Vintage, for doing the math on that.
Okay. But since you were here, has eBay Etsy changed in any way that might be different from the last time you were here? Because since you were here the last time, your video with Alyssa and two others broke the 1,000 views. That video is actually the highest I have on my channel right now.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Well, it probably has to do with Alyssa. She's fantastic. She's been doing the Etsy game a lot longer than me. She's got a fantastic store. I stalk her all the time, and I'm happy to say that we're friendly offline with each other too. So we're buddies. I really enjoy her store. I was actually just looking at it today, thinking if there was anything I wanted to buy from her. But as far as changes go on Etsy, Etsy has recently, in the past year, definitely gone through some changes. They changed their entire storefront. They gave us more categories. The pages look different than the way they used to. It caused a big hoo-ha, of course, by the Etsy sellers, and every handmade vintage, everybody was freaking out because the page looked different. But I will say there are some benefits to it. They made the pictures a little bigger so people can see those better, but I also think they kind of added a little too much to the Etsy store page, because if you scroll down the page, you see the items you have selling, but if you keep scrolling down the page, you see user reviews, which can be fine as long as you've got positive reviews. And then it can go down to the different shop updates that the Etsy sellers make. And the shop updates are kind of like an Instagram thing. You post a picture and then you'll say a few words about the picture and you can tag an item in it. It's kind of weird. I don't use it that often. And then you scroll down the page some more and it gives all your shop policies and all the nonsense that nobody ever reads. And so they I think they made the stores a little more busy and annoying looking than they used to be, where it was nothing but items. But what they have done, I think the layout, at least as far as the store goes, the layout is good. The pictures are larger. I hope it looks more inviting to buyers, but there's nothing I can do about it. The other major change that Etsy is trying to get people to jump onto is they have now offered a service called Pattern, which allows the user to basically create their own website. So then all of your Etsy items would be imported onto your Etsy Pattern website, and then you could direct your viewers, direct your customers directly to that website, And that prevents them from seeing the rest of Etsy and seeing the competition if you can feed your customers directly into that website. I think it's like $15 a month. I tried it for the 30-day free trial period, but I'm not going to make the extra effort to start pushing my customers to go to another website when they're used to finding me on Etsy. Just come find me on Etsy. It's simple to do. Thrifty Theresa. You put that in the search results, boom, my shop's going to show up, or my items are going to show up. But you will also see my competition. So I don't mind that. I support all the sellers on Etsy. I love it as a platform. I want everybody to be successful on it. So come to Etsy, check out my items. If you don't like it, go check out somebody else's items.
Garage Flips says, Theresa, is that your only platform? I came in a few minutes late. So sorry if you answered that already.
I did not answer that already, so no problem. Etsy is not my only selling platform. I am one of the people who started out reselling primarily on eBay. And I do have some items in Amazon FBA. However, I have really had to scale back. I mentioned how busy my life is with my work. I do have a full-time job, and that full-time job can have strange hours because it's a 24-hour thing. I could be working a graveyard shift, so, or whatever. So right now, I have not been very active on Amazon. I honestly don't think I've sent a shipment to Amazon since like August of last year. Although I still did make some pretty good money over the Christmas season because of all the inventory that I had on Amazon. I put in a ton of inventory during 2015 when I started Amazon. So my Amazon sales have really tanked because I'm not sending in any new inventory. And maybe that's something I can do when I get less on my plate and can start sending them boxes. I do still sell a little on eBay, but I don't necessarily enjoy it. Again, it has to do with the cost of selling on eBay, some nasty customers that could possibly be on eBay. I buy a lot on eBay. When Chris and I were getting ready for the show, I got a ding on my phone, and it was like, oh, I won an auction. I bought a pair of jeans. So I'm a good buyer on eBay, but I don't sell on there too often. I focus most of my effort on Etsy because I love the platform. I really love the shop that I've created. I love the items that I'm selling. And I put I wouldn't say all of my eggs in that basket because I've got some, fallback. I could go back to eBay. I could go back to Amazon. But my happiness comes from selling on Etsy. Etsy is where I get the joy of selling.
Okay. Like eBay, does Etsy, like eBay, allow you to import your items to another site, say Bonanza or any other selling sites that takes in inventory that you don't have to necessarily list on your own?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You cannot import items into Etsy. You have to manually create your listings one at a time. There's probably somebody out there who's made a bulk uploader like they do for eBay, but I don't know anything about it. I create my listings one at a time. I've got about 400 to almost 500 items in my store right now. You can import onto Bonanza or upload your Etsy items onto Bonanza, and I did do that for a while. Through most of 2015, I had a Bonanza store. I honestly only got maybe 3 or 4 sales on Bonanza that year, but it is something you can do to increase your exposure. I've stopped using Bonanza. There's just really no point for me to keep it up. But the one thing about importing or uploading your items to Bonanza on Etsy is It doesn't automatically remove the items the way that it does with eBay. Bonanza and eBay communicate with each other a lot better. When it comes to Bonanza and Etsy, you need to be on your Bonanza store and uploading the items manually. You have to remove the items that sell manually. So you need to keep up with what you're doing on Bonanza to make sure you're not double selling the same item. That is up to you.
Okay. Well, I see basically answered Swamp Picker's question in that answer. She told him how many items she had up.
Okay.
Brian Flip said, I saw you sell playing cards. Have you ever sold tarot cards? I found some at a garage sale, 1969 Grimaud French. Any tips on playing cards?
Oh, that sounds cool. I don't believe I've sold any specific tarot cards. I'm not opposed to it. I absolutely would. I would sell anything, that's vintage and cool and put it on Etsy. One of the tips about playing cards I have is you do not have to sell vintage playing cards. You can sell new mass-produced playing cards if they're cool. And the reason I say if they're cool is because people use playing cards for crafting. People use playing cards as what they call ephemera, paper ephemera. People use it for scrapbooking, for decoupage, for collages, for, dream boards, whatever. You can sell a pack of playing cards that might be missing cards. So then you would sell either the rest of the cards, together and just explain that some cards are missing. You can sell the cards, again, as craft supplies. So some people, and I actually tried doing this, is I opened a second shop on Etsy called Scrappy Theresa. Scrappy Theresa is not something I'm actively updating and selling on, but it was a nice experiment where I took my playing cards that I thought were cool or funky, and I was selling them in sets of 2 or sets of 4, and they only sell for $1 or $2. But then again, people will buy them, they will use them for crafting projects, and yeah, so you can list them as craft supplies, even if they're not vintage, listing them as paper ephemera. So that is my tip on playing cards with Etsy.
Now, you say, I know you're vintage, but can you sell, I think I asked this back then, but like I said, things changed in a year. Can you sell new stuff on Etsy yet now?
No. There are 3 different things that you can sell on Etsy. You can either sell something that is handmade, and that means handmade by you. That doesn't mean you bought something new and it, you find something at a thrift store, but you don't know how old it is. You can't necessarily say that it's vintage, but you're like, oh, well, it's handmade. I can sell it on Etsy. That's not the case. They want handmade sellers to be crafters, people who work with their hands and make these items, sell them to the public, knitters and beaders and jewelry makers and all that stuff, clothing designers. People sell their original clothing designs on Etsy. Vintage items have to be 20 years or older. So the cutoff date for vintage is 1996, which honestly feels like yesterday. So when you think vintage, it doesn't mean antique. It doesn't have to be super old. 1996 can still be like Pogs, early 90s stuff, early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that kind of stuff can be all over Etsy. The one thing that I can say that you can sell new are supplies. So if you want to open a supply store and sell beads or jewelry findings or gold chain or that kind of stuff that other people would then use as craft supplies, you can sell supplies that are new on Etsy. Yeah. People do search Etsy for craft supplies. Like I was saying with the playing cards, they will buy them and then use them for an artistic reason. A lot of jewelry makers buy their supplies on Etsy because they want to support other Etsy sellers. You know, but you want to have decent cost and decent profits and stuff there. So just be mindful of what you're selling.
Well, I got another question for you, but first, I want to repeat what Terry mentioned said in the chat, that if you do sell cards, use keyword ATC, artist trading cards, artist modified playing cards into tiny artworks.
Yep. Lots of crafty people do lots of crafty things with playing cards. That's one of the reasons I love them.
And Swamp Picker asks, matchbooks good for crafting?
I don't see why not. Again, it's something small. There's going to be people making little dioramas or something, and maybe that matchbook has a cool logo or something on it that they can use. I really don't see why not.
Okay. See, Debbie Bashen says she's coming back to reselling after a hiatus. So welcome back. I'm glad you are here to watch again. Garage wants to know, what is your top profit item? And he means like your bread and butter.
Okay, well, top profit and bread and butter are kind of two different things. At least they are in my mind. Some of the more expensive items or high dollar items that I've sold some vintage dolls, a plush Cubert doll I sold for, it was almost $200, I believe. I've sold some, what is that? So I sold some pretty good profits on some belt buckles, brass belt buckles that I had for $40 and $50 that were really cool. But really my bread and butter items are my smaller sales items. I sell a lot of the playing cards, and those can range anywhere from like $6 a pack to $12 or $15 if they're a double pack or if they're really special or unique. A lot of my other bread and butter items, I've recently listed a lot of postcards, vintage postcards from the 50s, 60s, and before. I've got some that go back to the early 1900s that are really cool. I've been selling those. Those generally still only sell about $5 or $6 each. My bread and butter items tend to be small dollar amount items, but as we all know, small dollar amounts add up if you're making several sales a day or several sales a week, which is always the goal.
And Swamp Picker has a question, and I think it's because of what's behind you. He wants to know, do you sell any crosses?
Actually, I do have some that I plan on listing. I collect crosses and crucifixes. It's just something that I enjoy. People probably think I'm like a total religious zealot, and maybe I am. I don't know. I really enjoy religious artwork. I've got religious tattoos like all over my body. I'm Catholic. I really enjoy the iconography. I would absolutely sell vintage crosses in my Etsy store if I don't wind up keeping them. Usually the ones that I find when I'm at thrift stores and such, it's like, oh, this will be cool in my collection. And the wall that I have behind me, I actually have a lot more crosses that I haven't hung up yet that I plan on putting along this wall. So maybe the next time I come on and visit Chris and talk to you guys, my whole wall will be covered in these things.
Garage wants to know, are there Chinese sellers on Etsy?
Yes, I believe that there are. There are a lot of international sellers specifically in the supply market, like I said, selling beads and jewelry findings and things like that. And I don't know how well they do. I don't know if they do really well or if they do poorly or if it becomes a problem. Because I don't sell supplies other than my paper ephemera stuff, it doesn't bug me. It doesn't bother me. I don't run into those sellers, and I don't run into people complaining about those sellers. But I know that they're out there. I have seen from just observation when I shop a lot on Etsy. I buy things on Etsy as well as sell. So you know, I search for things, and if I'm searching for we'll specifically say jewelry. If I'm searching for jewelry, I tend to find things that are mass produced, that are being sold by folks who are listing it as vintage. They're using the keyword vintage, vintage silver Tibetan ring or whatever. It's not vintage. It might look vintage. It's not vintage because there's 5 or 6 stores selling that exact same item. You are not selling a vintage item from what I can tell. And you know, if that's their business model, we'll see how long it lasts for them. I have seen in some of the Etsy teams or the Etsy forums people complaining about that, and some other buyers and other sellers will flag those user accounts so that Etsy will review them to make sure that they're following the Etsy rules. I don't flag people's accounts. I certainly wouldn't want it to happen to me if I were to mistakenly list something that was not vintage. I wouldn't want somebody to get upset and flag my account. So when I see some of these folks that may or may not be playing by the rules, I just let it go. It doesn't impact me. It's not taking sales away from me because primarily they're not selling the types of things that I'm selling.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here. Well, Rick Daddy, and this is a joke on your cross. It says vampire hunter.
No, I'm not a vampire hunter. I'm just a good Catholic girl who enjoys the imagery. Yeah.
And Terry Vengeance wants to know, how do you decide on sale price when listing on Etsy, as they don't have sold completed listings as eBay does?
That is true. You cannot search Etsy for sold items to figure out prices. I do search for my items on Etsy to see if other people are selling the same item or a similar item, and I do use their prices as guidance. I do also look on eBay to see if the same item is being sold over there and use their suggestions as guidance, the sold listings on eBay. One thing that I found, I use Google search for Google image search. So if I have a weird set of playing cards that maybe I can't identify, I will just type in keywords of what they look like, or do that reverse image look up on Google to see if I can find them. And sometimes I've found things listed on Etsy that have sold, and then there are ways that you can look at that Etsy page of the sold item and then find their prices by looking at the what's that called? Sorry, I'm not very technically savvy, but you right click on the page, you view the source, you go through all the HTML stuff, and you can find the price of the sale hidden in all of that documentation.
And
I think
go ahead.
I think Texas Gal Treasures, Margaret, has a couple videos on how to find sold prices on sold Etsy listings. So if you find the item on Google search and it was an Etsy sale, even though the item's sold, you can still find the price. It's just a lot more work.
Rick Day wants to know, any sterling crosses?
Probably not. Not to my knowledge.
Okay, and back to about the Chinese stuff. Cherry says, yep, there are some Chinese junk listed as vintage, but it's not. But Etsy is better about pulling that than eBay.
Yeah, I would say so. I think Etsy's pretty diligent about keeping their sellers honest, and I applaud them for that.
And my wife, who's watching, asked, can I sell crafts my mother makes for me, such as crochet items? I know you said they must be crafts I made, but what about my mother's new creations?
Well, I don't see that as being a problem. I mean, they're your moms. I'm talking about, if you find something that's already done, like for example, you found a decoupage box at a thrift store and it may be cool, but it doesn't have any identifying markers on it. It honestly looks like something that was handmade. Maybe it was something that somebody made in art school or whatever, and then they got rid of it and now you bought it. You cannot sell that as a handmade item because you didn't make it. But in this case, your mom crochets, she makes blankets or booties or whatever, pot holders, whatever it is that she makes. She is a handmade maker. There's absolutely no reason that you would not be able to open up a shop to help her sell her crafts.
Okay, well, I think the reason she was asking is because my mother-in-law lives in Florida, and sometimes she'll send us stuff up here to say, here, sell this, and I want you to make this much money off it. And it's like, well, it may not go for that. So she was wanting
Yeah. Handmade items is I think it's a pretty hard thing to sell. Even though Etsy started out being dedicated to handmade crafters and they expanded and allowed, riffraff like me in to sell vintage and stuff. I did start out selling as a handmade seller. I do have a handmade shop that is called Prayers for Theresa. I don't know where I came up with that. The Prayers for Theresa. I used to make handmade rosaries, and I would bead and chain and do all that stuff and make rosaries. And it started out as a hobby, and I would just give them to my church. But then I decided to start selling them because people were asking to buy them from me. So I was selling handmade rosaries on Etsy for about 3 years, from 2007 to about 2010. I used to go to a lot of craft fairs and stuff too. But selling handmade items, I think, is hard because there is so much competition now. There is so much more competition on Etsy of everybody making the same types of items that you have, that a lot of people feel the need to then drop their price. And then they get discouraged that they're not making a profit, and they're really, not making what this item is valued for. When it comes to taking the time to make the product with your hands, you need to be paid for your time as well as the supplies. And you have to calculate how much this item is now worth. And sometimes the item is worth a lot because it's based on your time and effort and supplies, but customers might not be willing to pay that much. Selling handmade is hardcore. I think it's not for the faint of heart. I think it can discourage a lot of people.
Okay, now here's a question from based on what you said. Chad says, what? But if you can tell it is handmade. So he says, so a 1900s quilt can't be sold as handmade.
Well, no, you would sell that as vintage.
But if it's handmade,
when you are creating your Etsy listing, I'll tell you exactly the way it looks. There's three things you need to fill out when you're doing your Etsy listing. The first question is, who made this product? And you either say, I made it, somebody on my staff made it. Maybe that would be your mother-in-law. if your wife is running your Etsy store and selling your mother-in-law's products, that would be your employee or whatever. So, my staff or employee made this item, or somebody else made it. If you choose that I made this item, that's exactly what you're saying. Now you are selling a handmade item. If you're saying that somebody that you employ made the item, it's still a handmade item. Those two selections are for handmade. I made it, or somebody from my shop or my business made this item. If you say somebody else sold the item, you have to either say it's now a craft supply or it's vintage. So there's no option really, what am I trying to say? I think I confused myself, but that is the thing. The very first thing that you have to fill out after you do your title and everything is who made this item. I made it. Somebody in my shop or business made it, or 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 somebody else made it, and then you have to clarify it's vintage or it is a supply.
Okay, so the example Chad would say, you would have to, they could say it was vintage and leave it at that. You can't say it was vintage handmade because even though it's 100 or 200 years old.
Okay, you have to categorize it as vintage. You can say in the title and you can say in the description that it is handmade. Absolutely. But when you are categorizing it, you would need to categorize that item as vintage because you did not make it, or your BFF or your mother, or the person that you employed did not make it on your behalf.
Okay, Swamp Picker wants to know how old is vintage. Now, before you answer that, I know that you said Etsy says 20 years. There's a lot of debate about, some people say, well, it's actually longer than that. Because some people even think it has to be 100 years, which that is not, that's an antique. So, your opinion on that?
My opinion on that is I'm happy that Etsy says vintage is only 20 years because that opens up more and more items for me to sell as vintage. When I think of 1996, which was 20 years ago, that wasn't that long ago. I can remember everything I did in 1996. I know what tattoo I got in 1996. 1996 is right around the corner. So when I go out sourcing at thrift shops or garage sales or whatever, there's more items open to me and available to me to sell if it is dated or if I can determine that it came out in the early 90s. That's fantastic. Being vintage is only 20 years back to the early 90s. There's always that cycle of popularity, that things come around again. When I was growing up, I grew up mostly in the 80s. In the 80s and early 90s, we were flashed back into the 70s, and they were bringing back bell-bottom jeans in the early 90s again and things like that. Now that it's the 2016, we can go retro, and retro could be in the 90s fashion. I know one of the things I do on YouTube is I like to interview other Etsy sellers. And one of the Etsy sellers that I interviewed, Chris Alicia, she has a shop for clothing, and she sells primarily 90s clothing because, face it, hipsters and stuff wear that stuff again. They wear the I don't know what people were wearing in the 90s, but she knows, she's clued in on fashion. So having vintage only be 20 years old is fantastic for all of us. It's really easy to find stuff that can be considered vintage to sell on Etsy.
Okay, Cherry Mansion says vintage is 20 to 100 years, retro is 10 to 20, antique is 100 plus.
Yep, I think that's a great definition. That's probably a standard definition that you would find across the board.
And Garage Flip said he's never looked at video games on Etsy. You might have to check them out. And you just said, so when I looked up vintage NES, Nintendo system stuff, they have flash drives that are made to look like NES controllers. How does that fit into the rules?
Well, clearly that flash drive was not made in 1996. I would highly doubt it. So that would not be compliant with the vintage Etsy rules. It needs to be manufactured and sold prior to 1996 or before, in order to fit on Etsy by the rules.
Well, he just said, never mind. They used a real controller to make it.
Okay.
So
then that would be a handmade item. So they took a video game controller and turned it into a flash drive. That is now, it's not only, it's a handmade item using vintage products. That's pretty crafty. That's one of the reasons Etsy's so cool. There's so much neat stuff on there.
Well, we got about 5 more minutes before the hour is up. So see if there's any more last minute questions. And I want to thank you for being on. I know, like I said, it's been over a year since you've been on. I should have had you on a lot sooner. Like I promised, I talked about all those times, excuse me, before about having you, Theresa, Angie, and another Etsy seller on doing the Women of Etsy. And I never got around to doing it.
Yeah, there's a few of us out there, and it would be great to have a show with all of us on there. I am glad that you want to have Etsy sellers on your show. I know that you primarily, in your reseller society and the other groups that you admin, primarily talk about eBay and Amazon. I think Etsy is a dark horse. I don't think a lot of people consider selling on Etsy. So I'm always happy to get the word out there that Etsy is a fun platform, an easy platform, a cheap platform. Again, the fees are very inexpensive, and I just find it wonderful. I love the customers. When I was selling my items, I know some people, I'll use Texas Gal Treasures as an example again, cross-list their stuff on eBay. So she has a very active Etsy shop, but she also sells those same items on eBay. So she's getting the double exposure, and she does really well with that. Personally, I don't really care for selling on eBay. I prefer selling on Etsy. I'm happier on Etsy. So I do not cross-list my items, but that is something that people do. So there's really no reason why you shouldn't give Etsy a shot. But I just want to reiterate that Etsy takes work. And I have read things on Facebook groups. I've seen people complain about it on videos and chats that, oh yeah, I created an Etsy shop. I put like 10 items in my shop and I didn't have any sales at all, and it's been 3 months. Okay, you can't do that on Etsy. You can't just throw a few items in your shop and walk away. Etsy is a platform where you need to be constantly updating your shop. You need to be listing items every day. I'm at the point now where I've got so many items in my shop that I can list 1 or 2 new items a day. I can relist items that have expired. But even when I don't have things to list or relist, I'm constantly working at my shop. I'm constantly updating my titles and tags. I'm taking new pictures of items that I haven't sold yet. Maybe my pictures weren't that good. I put a lot of effort into my Etsy shop to make it a success. But you know, it still is a hobby for me, and it still is fun. And yeah, that's why I like selling there, but it is a lot of work, and I want people to be aware of that. You can't just set it and forget it like people say on eBay and Amazon.
And I think in regards to the groups, I think a lot of people are either don't understand Etsy or are afraid to ask about it because all the groups have eBay, Amazon in their titles or in their tags. So the person is like, wait a minute, that might not be the group for me to ask this questioning. Even though there are a lot of Etsy sellers there that can answer these questions.
Chris, would you mind if I mentioned a Facebook group that is really great regarding Etsy? Is that okay to promote that group?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I know you're an admin for Facebook groups and stuff, so I want to be respectful. The Facebook group that I use when I ever have a question about Etsy is called Etsy Sales. That's it. It's just called Etsy Sales. It is a seller helping seller kind of forum, just like the Reseller Society and all the other great eBay and reseller groups out there. Etsy sales is not a place to go to sell your items, even though that's what it kind of sounds like. Etsy sales is for sellers to help each other and ask questions, get feedback about their shop. And I think the people that run that group are really great. They keep people on topic. I think that just like with any group, you're going to get the folks, some people that complain about stuff. But usually when people complain about stuff, saying that they had a bad customer experience or something, more and more people jump on to help that person turn it into a better experience, and maybe tell them, well, your sale might have went bad because you forgot to put some information in your listing or whatever. They try to help the seller out rather than just, mumble and groan and commiserate with them about how terrible humans can be. So so Etsy Sales is the name of the group. I'd be happy to send the link to Chris, so if he wants to link it in the video, we can do that. It's a great group for Etsy sellers, and I highly recommend it. Etsy also has their own forums that you can go to for assistance and guidance, but probably my first place I go is to the Facebook group Etsy Sales to get assistance from other sellers.
Okay, we have one question by Swamp Picker, and then a comment from the wife, and then I'll get ready to end this. The question is, are you better off starting with one item and add one a day? So assuming you say put one item up today, then tomorrow you put another one up, or do you want to be like on eBay where you put up 10 items and then start adding more each day?
I think it really behooves you to, at least build your shop up as much as you can at first so your page doesn't look empty. So when you're first starting your Etsy shop, sure, list as much as you can, get 10 or 20 items in there so your page is full. When you're looking at your Etsy shop, they got the little pictures all in a row so you can see what you've got. When your page is full, then you can take your time and list a little more slowly, building up your inventory. And by listing every day, you continue to refresh yourself and your presence in the Etsy search results and in the Etsy community. So I think adding as much as possible at first is great, but then you have to continue updating is the key.
Oh, we got one more question. I want to get this one in because a lot of my viewers may not be normal to Etsy anyway. So Idaho Paul's Clicker wants to know, is there a limit for beginners?
No, there is not a limit to the number of items that you can sell. There are some people who have small shops. They only have less than 100 items in their shop, but they may still get consistent sales if they're, selling good things and relisting frequently. But there is no limit that I'm aware of. I know some sellers have over 1,000 items in their shop. I've got almost 500, about 450 to 500 at this point in my shop. And I try to list 1, 2, 3 items a day, at least one a day. I usually try to get 2 or 3 up there.
Okay, and the comment that I wanted to read off is from the wife, because bringing up the mother-in-law. She said, just told Mom she's on Chris's staff. She just wrote back, well, I am vintage. I will be very happy to be on Chris's staff. Glad to be welcomed aboard.
Well, excellent. You guys got a little racket going on there, a little family business. Everybody loves a family business. So go for it.
We have one more question, rainbows and puppies. So every time I went, see, now these are the questions we had earlier, but that's okay. I'm sure they came in or didn't think about it. But rainbows and puppies wants to know, if you are just starting Etsy, how much is the monthly fee for a shop?
There is no monthly fee on Etsy. You are only getting fees for the items that you list. And again, it's 20 cents per item, and that listing is up for 4 months. So you're only paying 20 cents for 4 months. After your item sells, the final value fees are 3.5% go to Etsy, and then whatever the payment fee is, either it's basically the PayPal fee. I don't even remember how much it is, but it's really low. So I could sell something for like $25. I'm paying like less than $2 in fees, and the rest of it's just money in my pocket. So if the fees are really low, there is no monthly fee. It's not $19.99 a month or $39.90 a month. There's absolutely zero starting cost, except for your first starting cost would be 20 cents, and that would be for your very first listing.
And Purple Lily wants to know, how do you organize your stuff?
It's totally random. I'm not quite sure if you mean organize my stuff in my shop, like the way it's listed or the way that it looks, or if you mean organize my items in my house. If you're talking about organizing my items in my house, it is a system of boxes. I live in a very small apartment, and one of the things you'll notice if you look at my shop is the majority of the items I sell are small, because I don't have a lot of storage space. I also don't want to take up too much room with big, bulky shipping supplies, so I ship a lot of things in little manila envelopes or bubble mailers. Very rarely do I ever have to box something, because I don't sell things that are that big that need a box. Yeah, so my organization is a very small closet. And as far as the organization in my store, the way things look, I've got 15 categories, and I choose those categories myself. You create your own categories in your shop. So I've got a category for my playing cards. I've got a category for toys and games. I've got a category for vintage postcards. And if I stop selling vintage postcards, I can turn that into a new category. Maybe it'll be, Pyrex. Who knows? It's all up to you how you organize your own Etsy store.
I think that ended the questions. So again, I want to thank you for being here. I know it was kind of a last minute request. I asked you on that Monday.
That's okay. I was happy to accept. And for people who didn't see the beginning of the video, I will say again that I do make YouTube videos, but on the same day that Chris asked me to come on the live show, I also announced to my YouTube people that I'm taking a YouTube hiatus. So for the next 1 to 2 months, I won't be doing YouTube videos, because I've got a lot of work on my plate with my full-time job, working weird hours and stuff. I just can't make a commitment to be doing my haul videos and my sales videos and things like that. So if you subscribe to me, you may not hear from me for a while, but eventually I'll pop up with something and you'll be like, oh, I remember that girl. So if you want to check out my channel, please do. I've got some tutorial videos on there. I have a 4-part series on how to create an Etsy listing, and that includes everything from creating my titles and descriptions, and all the way down to how I do some research for pricing my items. So you can check those videos out. I think they're about 10 minutes each, and it gives you a nice little rundown on how I list on Etsy.
Oh, we got 2 more questions. My wife said she forgot to ask, can you sell food like jam on Etsy?
Yes, you can sell food. I have purchased food on Etsy. I have a video where I did a taste test of I bought 2 different packs of homemade fudge from 2 different sellers. They were both a coconut fudge. Coconut's my favorite thing on the planet. And I did a little taste test. I bought from each seller. It's like, oh, this is really nice. And I figured out which one I like the most. There are handmade food sellers on Etsy. I don't know anything about selling food on Etsy, if there's any sort of rules that you have to go by, or if you have to have some sort of special agreement from your state that it's okay to sell your items, for safety reasons. You may want to look into that a little bit, but yes, selling food on Etsy is handmade, and you can sell jams, preserves, fudge, cookies, anything. You could sell a lasagna on Etsy, I'm sure, if you could ship it to somebody safely and, figure out how to get it to them quickly before it spoils. You could sell lots of stuff on Etsy.
And for the last question for the night, and I don't know if you really answer this because you said you're not good at your percentages, but Thrifty wants to know what percentage of your Etsy items sell during the first listing.
Wow, a lot. A lot of items sell on the first listing. So again, that first listing lasts a whole 4 months. So that's a lot of time for viewers to see it and find it. I would say I've never really thought about it, and that's a great question. So thank you for making me think about it. But I would probably say most of my items sell on the first listing, and then if it expires, I will relist it and just see how it goes. One of the great things about having Etsy with their low listing fees is that I can have a ton of stuff in my shop, and it doesn't cost me a lot of money every month to sell or have those things listed. So if an item doesn't sell and I list it again, maybe it'll sell the second time around. I've been doing this now since November of 2014 is when I opened my Thrifty Theresa shop, and I believe I have a very small percentage of items that have been there longer than, I would say, 3 cycles. I have a clearance section in my store for some items that have been around for a while that I'd kind of like to see get rid of. And I believe most of those are on like their 3rd round. So that's, 4 months, 3 rounds of 4 months is a whole year. So those items are ready to go. For the most part, I think most items sell within that first 4-month period.
Before I end this, want to give everybody your Etsy store name again, so that way they can look you up if they want to. Maybe use you as a guide of what to do and what not to do.
yeah, check my store out so you can see what not to do. It is Thrifty Theresa. That's all one word, and I do spell my name with an H, Theresa. However, I will say if you spell it without the H, you will still find me. When you have your Etsy store, you can see your daily statistics and that includes all the keywords that people have used to found your shop. I see people type my name in all sorts of weird ways, and there's spelling errors galore, but they still make it to my shop. So Etsy's pretty good about helping you find people. So even if you spell my name wrong, you should still be able to find me.
Okay, yeah, now talk about it. You have a second called Scrappy Theresa too?
I do. I have a total of 3 shops. Thrifty Theresa is my main shop for vintage. Scrappy Theresa is my second shop where I do sell some playing cards, and then I sell the playing cards specifically for scrapbooking or ephemera crafting purposes. So that's Scrappy Theresa. And then I still have my old rosary shop, Prayers for Theresa. And that still has some rosaries in it that I made a long time ago. I haven't made any new rosaries in a while. I still have that shop open, and it still has some inventory in it. And yeah, so those are my 3 shops. I've got links to all of those shops at the top of the page of my main Etsy shop, Thrifty Theresa. So you can check those out at your leisure.
All right. But with that being said, I want to thank you again for being on.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank all 20 plus watchers we've had for most of the night. for being here with good questions. Sorry I didn't do the normal shout outs, but I wanted to get good information out tonight. I will see you guys on Sunday night. You want to say something, Theresa, first?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say I haven't really been paying attention to the chat because I'm trying to pay attention to the questions that you're asking. But I do see Treasured Vintage, Angie's in there. She has a fantastic shop. I appreciate Cherry Vintage putting in her input too. It's a great platform with a lot of great sellers. I love supporting other Etsy sellers, so I'm so glad that Chris has been having a lot of Etsy sellers on his store, on his show recently. I hope you guys aren't getting overloaded with Etsy information, but maybe it'll be good to just, you know, push people to give it a try. You might be pleasantly surprised.
All right, everybody. I will see you Sunday night for the Sunday Night Live show with Rebecca, and then I'll be working on next week's episode for the other show during that time. So thanks for watching, and I will see you later.
Bye.